Hello, welcome to the February 17th, 2026 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you've not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat area or simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you realize that my ability to answer questions in kind of a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed with the number of questions that come in, we'll try our best to get through as many questions chronologically as asked in order. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you have, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro. Also with version number, so if it's 12, 13, 14, or 15, and operating system, so if you're running on Windows or Mac OS, that information is helpful. We should have an index of all topics that are discussed with timestamps pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends, so you can quickly navigate to particular topics. If you want to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, there's been over 43,000 topics. You can go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm, who I see is on the live stream, for creating that site. We have two people that serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. They are not Steinberg employees. They do it to make it a better community experience. We want to give special thanks to them, and also an extra kudos to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial, let me clear my throat, for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community with links, tutorials, downloads, so all sorts of great stuff there. So really beneficial to Steinberg users. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products. I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. area in the United States in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and begin. All right, we see Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven, Mark Rabin's dog Stella, and other pets that are nearby, and he's ready to learn. All right, so we have a question from Theory from France. How to open two editors at the same time. For example, one for the drums and the other for bass in Cubase 15. Thanks in advance. Okay, so if you want to see two different editors open at the same time, you may have to change a default system preference. So if we don't get, or default Cubase preference rather, so we'll come here to your preferences or settings, depending on your operating system. And if we go to editors, you may see that we'll have this will be the default behavior of the editor content follows event selection. We want to uncheck that. We hit apply for that change to take place. I will double click here. Let's open an editor. I'll move it into kind of its own separate window. All right. And now I will open another MIDI editor. I will just come right over here. Let's move this into its own separate window, and I will move it over. So now when we come over here, we could go to this window to make our two key editor windows open, showing different parts. So once again, it's really contingent upon a particular preference or setting. So come over here to editing, and we'll see an editors section, and just make sure to uncheck editor content follows event selection, and that will allow you to have multiple editor windows open simultaneously, so you can look at multiple parts in different MIDI editors. All right, so we see Jan from Cubase Index on. We have Matt Elston checking in. from London. Thanks for joining us. All right, we have VS Terra Nova joining from Amsterdam in the Netherlands. We have Stefan joining from Sweden. Always wonderful to see Michael Marshall from Somerset, UK. So, with perfect attendance, we have Jazz Dude. Always great to have you on. Appreciate everything you do for the group and community. All right, and we see Vince as Fly V from Winnipeg. See John Barry joining from England, from the, I believe it's the English Riviera, he calls it. All right, we have Uno Memento joining from Finland. All right, Ecstasy Tunes asks, hi Greg, how to turn off generic plugin editor? So usually if you have kind of a plugin that is kind of popping up, so let's say I just have this plugin here. If we just kind of come over here, you could switch to the generic editor. So let's say if I just double click here, it'll look like this. So you'll probably see this little drop down menu, and then you could actually just come right here and switch to the plugin editor. So this little triangular drop down menu, you could switch to the generic editor versus the plugin editor views. All right. We see Roland Stuff joining from Sussex, England. All right, so we see Tim Weinheimer just saying thanks to Steinberg for the great tutorial videos like Joran Lopez. Video is so helpful for adding creative songwriting. All right, Val is just sending greetings from a very snowy and cold Vienna. Thanks for joining us today. All right, we see Nico Thomason joining from Hamina, Finland. Thanks for being online and part of the community today. All right, so we have Carlos Galindo 2728 says, how come on Cubase Elements 15 when adding text or words while using Omni Vocal, my words don't sound in English when playing back the track? I'm in San Antonio, Texas. Thank you. All right, so let's say we'll do new project. So we'll add Omni Vocal as an instrument. All right, and I'll just play like a little melody. Let me just maybe add this as a pattern event. Okay. Okay, so let's say when we first kind of play in, we may just get like a basic sound. So let's come over here, and what I want to do now is we will take our Omni Vocal, and when we select a particular word, we could see a text field. And if I want one word to go over to syllables, I'll put a dash. So let's see, at the end. So when I come here, so you just kind of enter in the lyrics there, and it should come out for you. I'll play just a quick example. So if we want to see something that's been prepared. Let me just see if I have my... So as we come over here, let me just go to my... It doesn't seem to want to work on that, but generally you just kind of come right over here, and in the text area you can just write in the text, and that will kind of do the trick for you. All right, so we see from Val, just says, "How are you?" To me, says, "Long time no hear. Hope you are fine and sane and safe in the U.S. I pray every day." Yep, so I'm doing fine. Let me just clear my throat. Doing fine. Just got busy with wrapping up some travels and lots of flight delays, but my family and I are doing well here. All right, so we have Steve Baniemi just says, "Hey there." We see Gareth just saying, "Evening, Cubase Loleros." I was just watching like video of in northern Spain and Portugal of lots of flooding from the storm, so I was thinking, Gareth, I hope everything is well where you are. All right, so we see Alex joining from Lake Havasu, Arizona. Thanks for being online. All right, we see Rick from Bratman Studio just says, "Super rainy in Southern California, cold and windy, but a hot bowl of cereal and hotter Cubase stream." All right, we see Mark Rabin. Everyone give a big woof to Mark Rabin's dog, Stella, who's joining in. It says Mark is just saying, just popping to say gratitude for everyone here, especially Greg and Jazz Dude. And all right, so we see from Val, says, "Since I got the Absolute Collection in HALion 7, I can't open or route any presets with the library manager or inside Cubase. It works perfectly with HALion Sonic, interestingly enough." So, a couple things to check is, one, you may have to check, and this happens to me periodically on this machine, but if I go to my MediaBay window, come over, and you'll see like VST sound. Make sure that all of the libraries have a check mark to the left of them. If they do have a check mark, and they may, if HALion Sonic is seeing them and HALion isn't, go over to, let's go to the Steinberg website. All right, and then if you want to do, or you could just even just do a Google search for Steinberg MediaBay download. And make sure that you downloaded the latest version of MediaBay. So there were several updates for MediaBay that were introduced, and that could often resolve when it's being seen by one instrument and you think it should be seen by the others. So try just downloading that particular MediaBay right there, and I think that will resolve it for you. All right, so we have Gates checking in from Quebec, Canada. We have Uno Memento saying hello, and woof to Mark Rabin. All right, so we see from Ecstasy Tunes, hi Greg, is there a way in HALion 7 to morph samples like MPC expressive pads? Let's give it a shot. I don't usually do that, but if we, well, I'm sure it can be done. I may not be able to find it easily, but let's give it a shot. Okay, so let me just find two samples to work with. Okay, so now all right, so we'll come over to like just our mapping area here. So let's say we want it okay. All right, so let's see if we, let me just undo that. Let's see if we set up like a different layer between them. Okay, so now we have all right, so now and let's see if we could have this. Let me create another new layer here. I'm not sure if I need to make a new layer, but we'll. Okay, so now we have both samples, and let's see if we could do. So let's see if we do like a mega trig. If we come over here. And see if we set this up for like modulation. There's probably a much better way of doing this. All right, so I don't think it's going to be. Let's see if I delete. So we have both layers, and if you wanted to, like, let's see if I can figure out how to just do like moving the mod wheel between to do the different layers. Let's see if I come over to. So let me know if you wanted to, like, if I'm not that familiar with the expressive pads, but if you wanted to, you could, you know, just come over here and use like the modulation wheel to kind of bring up different sounds. But let me know if I'm going down the wrong path, and I might be able to just simply, you know, if you explain kind of exactly what the MPC expressive pads, I could, you know, have it prepared for Friday's live stream if I can't figure it out today. Sorry about that. And also probably some of the other instruments, let me just see, may allow you to just kind of add samples and morph between them. So let's say if we do, again, one more, I'll just take a look. Maybe one of the wavetable. So let's see if we drop. But yeah, let me know if it's just like taking two different sounds and morphing them with like a MIDI controller. If you could let me know that would be helpful for me. All right, so we see Mark Ravens. It's snowing in Montana. It says finally it's been way too warm. All right, we have Brian Sawyer checking in from Yuma, Arizona. All right, Tim Heinrich English is saying hello, party people. All right, so Fly V is just asking, how can I get rid of a Cubase startup pop-up? Also another on after it says resolve missing files. So if it is a message about like resolving missing files, and if it's a project and all of the audio files are playing, I would, once the project is open, come right over here and just say remove unused media, and then save the project again. And then at that point, it should not reference files that it's searching for. So the files may be referenced in the project or maybe in the pool, and it can't find those particular files. But if it's not being used in the project, just go to your media menu and you could just remove unused media, or if you go to your pool window itself, you can right click and you'll see remove unused media, but there isn't any unused media there. So give that a try. All right. Okay, Roland Stuff says, hi Greg, when using a Groove Agent beat in the drum machine, is there a way of panning the individual sounds? I'm using a beat with a hi-hat that sounds a little extreme as it's panned hard left. Thanks. Okay, so I'm not sure, let's say, if it's a Groove Agent, so I'm going to assume it's a Groove Agent. Let me know if I'm mistaken, but maybe a Groove Agent sound that is being routed through the pattern editor. Okay, so it says when using a Groove Agent beat in the drum machine. So let me know if it is. So if I come here, let's add a Groove Agent SE. And we'll come over, we'll load up. All right, so let's come over here to like future past perfect. Say, okay. So if we have, let's say, our pattern playing, and I wanted to go to, because often we could do it in, so if I want to come to the hi-hat here, so let's say, so now within Groove Agent, I could pan it all the way to the right or to the left. So that's with like a beat agent kit, so any of the sources. So if it was a, let's say if it is more of an acoustic agent kit, so let's say if we come over here, so now if we come over here, we go to the mixer. So I could take like my hi-hat, so let's say if we solo the hi-hat here, and now we could pan the hi-hat accordingly. Now if it is in the drum machine itself, so let's come over. And if we have the drum machine, we can now just come over here. So I'm going to add a drum track. And let's load up a quick preset here. So if we take this particular sound, we can choose to at this point just say, okay, we want to pan the individual source directly here as well. So each source, you can just come over here and pan. So let me know if I'm misunderstanding. So it's just when using Groove Agent, beat, and drum machine is a way of panning the individual sounds. So, and if you wanted to, if we had a beat that was programmed here. So let's say if I go to the editor and we program a particular, let's say we'll just come to the kick. So let's so if we wanted to adjust kind of the panning within the drums, what we could do now is go to like the drum machine. I'm going to just say, okay, let's grab our hi-hat here. Let's right click and we're going to add it to the pattern editor as an event. We go to the pattern. We could say, okay, we're going to adjust our panning. So at this point, we could adjust the panning independently on each source as well. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right, so we see from TrackQuest Music, clear my throat, sorry. Says when I record automation, the green R lights up. Is there any way to make that not light up on every channel? Only want the green R to light up on the automated tracks. Okay, so let's say if we have a number of audio tracks here. Okay, so I will just come over. Let's say if I automate, and we'll make all these tracks a little larger. All right, so let's say I want to automate this track. So I'm going to write onto this track and I move automation. That's the only track that that enabled the read of the automation. So you may see it that it'll be globally indicated here, but when we go to the bottom, we can you see that this is the only track that was automated, and that's the only track that has read automation enabled. So let me know if yours is working differently than mine. Okay, so my chat field jumped. Okay, Tim Weinheimer asks, what are different ways you can change the pitch of a note in the MIDI or instrument track, more specifically the octave? Okay, so let's say we have an instrument track here. So if we want to adjust notes by octave, I could just kind of come right over here. Let me make this event larger here. Okay, so I'll just put some notes at C3 and D3, C sharp 3. Okay, so if we want to adjust these notes by octave, so I could move it by semitone by using just the up and down arrow keys on the computer keyboard, but if you hold down shift and arrow, that will knock it up or down an octave, shift plus down arrow. So just the arrows will move kind of chromatically, shift plus arrow up, an octave up, shift plus arrow down, an octave down. And that will be for the selected notes. If I have these notes selected, the notes that aren't selected will not be affected. So let me know if that's what you want to see, Tim. All right, so we see Mark Rabins only has 0.5 centimeters of snow in his yard. So I probably have more snow in my yard in Virginia. All right, so Cliff Scherer is joining from Germany. Thanks for being part of the community today. See other people giving a big woof to Stella. And Stella saying woof to Jazz Dude. See, Mark Rabin just says that USA RAM prices are crazy. About a 32 gig, 16 gigs by 2 for $60. Now it's $250. I think there's a lot of the excuse I hear is a lot of AI processing needs or buying up RAM and SSD drives. So. All right, we see John Costigan joining from Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right, Michael Teams is giving 1 gallon of maybe Dutch chocolate ice cream to Mark Rabin. All right, so we see from Val, just says, thanks for everything you help, because now it just asks to search for samples. Okay, so we see, okay, now I have 5,380 samples missing. So one of the things also to check, Val, if it's showing up in HALion Sonic and not HALion, there were recent updates. So maybe the HALion Sonic got updated and HALion did not. All right, we see Terry Gray joining from Minneapolis area. Hope you're well. Okay, OTM Flacco says, hey, I'm new to Cubase and it's my first series DAW. I just want to ask about importing 2-track instrumentals. Why does Cubase time stretch my beat on import? Transport BPM is set, but changes in pool. So probably if you're taking an audio file in, so let's do just a quick new project here. And I will import an audio file. You want to make sure that the audio file is probably set to musical mode. So I will come over. Okay, so let's say if we have just kind of like a normal audio file that we imported here. All right, so what you want to do is every file may have like a tempo stamp in it, depending on when it was recording, but you'll probably see this little icon over here for musical mode. Try to make sure that when you select the events themselves, that musical mode isn't checked. Because what musical mode will try to do is to take the tempo stamp of the event and try to make it fit into the current project, which is probably not what you want to do. You may want other events to follow the tempo of the event that was imported. But when you do that, make sure that musical mode, you select both events and make sure that musical mode is not enabled or turned on. Right, Jazz Dudes receive 1 gallon of Dreamsicle ice cream from Michael Teams. See, Mark Raven says, hey, Greg and Jazz, I want to buy you both something nice for all the help you bring everyone. I bet they want to pitch in also. I'm really sincere. You two have saved us all so much frustration. So I'm doing this as part of my job, so I'm being compensated for that. But, you know, but I think it'd be wonderful to show appreciation for Jazz Dude for all of his efforts with this as well. So maybe, you know, Jazz Dude could post an idea like Amazon gift card or something or whatever. So if you want to contribute, but this is part of my job, so I really couldn't accept anything for that. All right, so we see Mark Raven just kind of continuing, just says, I wish there's a way to buy you a coffee or something. So, yeah, you know, maybe Jazz Dude has an idea what works for him if you want to donate anything to show appreciation and gratitude. All right, Conscious Power 6302 says, can we change the default save location of track presets we create? So generally the track presets are always going to go to the same area, so that when there's a new Cubase version, when something else changes, you know, that Cubase knows where to look for the track presets. So they're kind of always going to be saved in a known, the concept is, and the design intention is that, you know, Cubase doesn't have to go hunting for all of your track presets. So when you go from Cubase 14 to 15, all your track presets are in kind of a separate independent area of the program. So if you uninstall 14, your track presets don't disappear. So they kind of go into an area like folders that are kind of, you know, not really determined, not fixed to a particular version, so that any version can open and access that preset. And it's able to do that because it knows where the track presets are. So, but if you need to move them to a new computer, you could just simply come over to like the export a profile manager, and you could save all of your track presets could be exported there. If you make a user preset and you want to copy it over, so let's come over and say, I want to come over, let's make some changes. Okay. And let's say I want to save this as a track preset. So we'll just right click, save track preset. We'll say Conscious Power. I think it's 6302. So now when I come over to, you know, any version of Cubase, I could just come over here and say, okay, let's get to your user presets, to track presets, to audio, and, you know, then we could just kind of search, you know, and find those particular presets because we know that they're always going to be in the same location. All right, so we see bass series. Is there a way to change note articulations from from multiple MIDI tracks, a horn session, for example. So we might be able to copy them. Let's go take a look and see if we could copy. But I think there isn't a way to automatically do an edit and like for MIDI CCs and have it applied to multiple tracks, because that could get into, there's a lot of consequences there that could cause problems. But let's say if I have this, I will load up an instrument track here. And also, depending on your instruments, the instrument articulations may not carry over. So let's say I have a cello and I wanted to go to a violin. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go to, here we'll go to our expression map. Okay, and we look at our articulations here. So let's go ahead and just enter in some articulations. And let's do these as pits. Spiccato, and now we'll do pits. Back to spiccato. All right, so let's say if I come here, let's say select all the events, I copy. Let's say if I move this to a different part here. All right, I will go to the violin sound and let's do its articulations. So say I have no articulations in my violin. If I come here, you can paste the articulations over. But, you know, doing kind of, you know, just because you see multiple parts on a particular project or an event, that could be problematic when copying over CC data, because it's easy to erroneously or wrongly copy CC data over to other parts just because you're viewing multiple parts. All right, so we see from Nidhis Saxena, it says how to use Previewer on track preset tab. I can see in the bottom. So if you're looking for, like, you know, track presets, you can, so let's say if we have, I'll just take a couple vocal files here.
I feel the weight.
All right, and let's say I want to work on
In light we lay.
So if we come over here to our presets,
Day after day after.
and let's say I'm looking for
I feel the weight.
so if I just kind of drag and drop,
In light we lay. Day after day after.
So you could just kind of drag and drop to preview. But you know, the track presets are processing, so unlike a like a particular instrument sound, you have to populate the data. So when you come over here we'll see our inserts automatically like populate when we select this, and I drag different track presets over. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do. All right, Super Mary 957 asked, does Cubase Profile Manager include my custom track presets? Yes. So it'll include like your custom track presets, your plugin presets, your preferences, your key commands, global workspaces, stuff like that. See Daja. All right, so Mark Raven is saying that Stella will lick you, his dog, if you don't hit the like button. So hit the like button. All right, so we see Daja 2946 says, geez, I just joined, and within 30 seconds hearing about how to resolve unused media project was gold. Thank you. Mark Raven just says, oh, also thank you to those who listened to the latest album. I'm surprised by the amount of plays. I guess someone likes it. Congratulations on your release. Thanks for the reminder. I'll go listen to it when I'm doing the index tonight. All right, so Cliff Share says, hi Greg, I own Cubase 15. My May synth, those Omnisphere. I still would like to use Steinberg's MIDI patterns, but not load all VST instruments due to hard drive capacity. How can I load the MIDI? So let me know where you're getting the MIDI patterns from. So, there are MIDI loops that come with Cubase. So if we come over here to loops and samples, so say if we go to the sequel library, so, if we're doing kind of, let's say, a new project. Now, the difference between like a MIDI file and a MIDI loop is the MIDI loop itself contains the sound of the instrument that it was saved with. So again, we'll come over and say, okay, now I want to go to, I know I have some MIDI loops in here. So it's like, okay, let's just grab. So when I drag that out, we could see, okay, this is that particular MIDI loop was designed not to play back through an organ or through a strings patch, but that was designed to just play back through a particular instrument. So a MIDI loop itself will incorporate the particular instrument with it. So let me know if those are the MIDI loops that you want to play back through Omnisphere. But if we had a different instrument, so let's say, okay, just come over here to the grand, and now I want that brass part to play back through an upright piano. I can now just move that to the upright piano. So let me know when you're referring to the Steinberg MIDI patterns. Now, if it's in the pattern editor, all you'd have to do is when you get to load the instrument track, just come over. So let's say, okay, I want to go to Retrolog or Omnisphere in your case. So now we could do this. We'll find a quick preset. Let me just come over here. Yeah, so we'll load just one more instance here of Retrolog. But when you go to add the instrument track, you could choose to add it as a pattern event. And now when you come over here to the editor, you could just say, okay, I want this to be a melodic pattern. So let's say, okay, I want this to be a melodic pattern. I want it to be in the key of E minor. So now as we play, And then if you want it to be polyphonic, we choose a polyphonic sound. So if you wanted to do, when you mention, still like to use Steinberg MIDI patterns, but again, just when you add it, just come over, when you go to add the instrument track, just make sure that you have it set to pattern event if you wanted to work with the pattern editor instead of like the traditional key editors. All right, Mark Raven thinks we should have more likes. All right. All right, so Michael Teams has granted me, or Gareth rather, 1 gallon of chocolate cherry mash ice cream. Okay. Okay, so you see from Roland stuff says, sorry, Greg, I should have said I was using the Groove Agent beat in the pattern editor. Thanks for showing me how to add the pan control to the pattern editor. I hadn't seen that before. Great. All right. Sorry for misunderstanding on my end. All right, so we see from TrackQuest Music, says, yeah, mine is lighting up on every track. It's really distracting. Please help me find a way in preferences or whatever, because it's acting globally on every track, showing the green R. Okay, so make sure one, like if you have all of these in, let me know if they're all in a folder. So, this is with the automation, when we write automation. So let's say I have 10 tracks. Or we'll just do like 4 tracks here. And we'll make these all slightly larger. All right, so you can see that I have my read-write automation here. So when I just click on this, now if these are all in a folder, let's see if that changes the behavior. So let's say if I come here, so if I change, let's say, on, or if they're in a group. So let's say if we have this and we have group editing on, that doesn't change it. Let's see if these are all routed to a group. We just route the selected channels to a group. All right, so now when I do the group, let's see if I come over, so that's not doing it. Now let's see if we have these channels linked. So if I come here, I'll hold down Shift, we'll select these. Let's see if there's a channel link, if we create a channel link. All right, and here there's, let's see if there's automation. All right, so now I have these channels all linked together. So let's say if I now go to, all right, it's still doing only that one particular track. So I can't recreate that on my end, but let me know if I don't think there's a preference for that. Make sure that, obviously that you only have one track selected. So if I have tracks 1 through 3 selected and I click on or maybe quick link is on. So let's see if I have quick link turned on. then that could do it. So if in your mixer, you know, if you have Q-Link enabled, that could kind of recreate that behavior. Maybe see if you have Q-Link enabled, if you bypass that, if that helps. All right, so we see from Spy Guy, it just says, just got here, don't confuse me. So, all right, Tim K has received 1 gallon of raspberry swirl ice cream. All right, so Rob Schmedeke says, is there a way to change the tempo track after detecting it? What is the best way after detecting to later change offbeat or change into a double time feel? Can you later use the smooth tempo? Yeah. So let's do just new project. Okay, so we'll listen to our click track here. And again, no correlation with the click. So if I've done a tempo detection, so I'll go to my project menu. All right, now when we do the tempo detection here, you know, what you could do is, just we'll do it one more time. So watch what tool shows up. So we don't have our tempo detected. When I go to my tempo track and we choose tempo detection, at that point it places us in the time warp tool so that, you know, we could just say, okay, I want to do a warp grid. So this is basically figuring out like every beat. Now let's say I needed like after that fill, measure 17 wasn't as accurate. So it places us into our time warp mode. So what we could do is make little adjustments here. And as we do this, we could see, okay, we could do just kind of an analysis. So let's say, okay, I need to move measure 17 to be on this transient instead. So this way you kind of have the tool to do like a quick review. If needed. So it kind of places you in with the appropriate tool for doing that. Now, if we wanted to take this tempo and smooth it out, and what we want to do is to tell this file to now follow this tempo change, and we do that by going to audio to advanced. So if we wanted to do tempo smoothing, we would now again come over here, advanced, and we say set definition from tempo. So I hit OK, and now I want to maybe say, okay, we're in 4/4 for this song. We just kind of listen to it, and we can count our meter. All right, so now that we have done the set definition tempo, we'll see like this little icon appear. And now as I make tempo changes, let's say I wanted to smooth the tempo, I would switch to my selection tool. And now I could just kind of smooth the tempo out so it's not fluctuating as much. So now we're going to regulate the tempo. Now if I wanted to take kind of like a whole area here and speed it up, like do a retard or an accelerando. Back to, or you want to do a retard here. And now you could just simply kind of adjust the tempo, tighten it up, loosen it, whatever you want to do accelerandos, you know, and make it more rubato and have the tracks automatically follow. So whether it's a single track, so just select, once you've done the tempo detection, select the event or events, audio to advanced to set definition from tempo, and then it will, the tracks will kind of dynamically automatically fit to time. All right, great to see Benny on from Sweden. Okay, so we see from Tim Weinheimer, just says, what I want to know, what application or what MIDI modifier, which one to use to change the octave. You know, so if we have, let's say, a, you know, so if you wanted the MIDI data, so we'll just add so if we have MIDI notes here, all right, so if I wanted these particular notes to just, you know, be at their exact position, but want them to play an octave higher, at this point we could go to, we will select, let's say, our track. And if we go to MIDI modifiers, I could transpose and set this to 12. Now this track, these notes stay at the same position and will sound an octave higher. So if you want to just quickly try out different octave transpositions there, but if you wanted to physically move the notes, that's when just holding down shift plus arrow up or shift plus arrow down on the selected tracks will allow you to adjust the octaves. So either way will kind of get you the same results, but if you want to have the notes actually sound, see them visually where they are, then you could just use the shift and the arrow keys, or if you wanted to just, you know, have them play an octave up, just go to the MIDI modifiers and you could just choose plus 12 for an octave up or minus 12 for an octave down. Okay. See from Papa Vol says, watching these twice weekly streams are also now becoming a quote-unquote part of my job too, although it probably shouldn't, so we won't tell. I think lots of people watch them at work. All right, so Rick has received 1 gallon of coconut almond fudge ice cream from Michael Teams. All right, Daniel Pashman says, hey, Greg, why hasn't Cubase integrated with Splice yet? So I believe that there is a Splice VST3 plugin, so, you know, that people use to kind of audition loops. I'm not I don't have a Splice subscription or anything like that. I know that there may be other programs are offering kind of maybe deeper levels of integration. But, you know, check out the Splice VST3 plugin. I know lots of people use that. Okay, so we see from Val, just says, I think I found a solution in the download manager. Some of the instruments were shown as failed. I'm currently reinstalling them. Yes, let me know what you find. All right, so we see from Mullen stuff, hi again, Greg. I just upgraded my computer. Now has a large latency playing any VST in Cubase 15 Pro from my external keyboard, 200 to 300 milliseconds. Nothing else has changed. Any thoughts, please? So one, make sure that you have the correct ASIO driver for your particular system, for your particular audio interface. If you get to your audio system here, you know, you'll probably see just as selected, you know, the ASIO driver. And if you're running like a Steinberg or Yamaha USB audio interface, like a UR series, you may have like kind of a Steinberg like audio driver. And if you have that selected, that's kind of intended to work with audio interfaces, like onboard audio interfaces that may not have a dedicated ASIO driver. And you'd want to use the Yamaha Steinberg USB driver if that's the case. So that could increase your latency. You know, so two other things cause latency. One is the buffer size of your audio interface. So usually when you come over here, you can say, okay, I want to go to my control panel, and you could see if decreasing the buffer size, if this is set to something like 1024, 2048, that would increase the latencycy. Another thing that could cause latency is when you have plugins on particular tracks. So let's say if I come here to my inserts, and in my project I just happen to have like a vocal chain. So this is a very complex plugin. It is intended more for kind of mixing after the fact. And if you actually right click on the inspector tab here on the left, you can see setup sections. One of the sections will be latency, and here we can see like this plugin itself is causing 200 milliseconds of latency just because it's enabled in the project. So if you have like a lot of plugins that have latency, if you go to the lower left hand corner, there's this button called constrained delay compensation. And you see that when I turn this on, what that will do is bypass the particular plugin so that that plugin isn't adding latency. So if I wanted to come over here, let's duplicate this track a couple times. And if we look at it in our mix console, again, we could just kind of right click. We'll go to setup sections. We can see our channel latency. And it's probably going to be so, and then you could actually kind of see, just make sure it's active. Then you could see kind of if you have tracks that are causing latency in your system, like right over here as well. So you could kind of see if you have plugins that are causing latency. And one quick way of doing that is just to use the constrained delay compensation here on the lower left hand side. So as we do this, you can see this figure of the latency on each and every single track. And if we have multiple plugins on a particular track, so let's say if I come to like a multi-band compressor, there's generally have high latency. So we can see that this track itself is 359.3 milliseconds of latency. When I click here, I could see the breakdown of what plugins are causing latency. So if you have the correct ASIO driver set and the correct like a buffer size that's kind of 512 samples or lower, check your plugins, because the plugins resident in the project could be causing latency. And you can do just a quick check just by using the constrained delay compensation. And that will allow you to kind of bypass plugins that are, causing latency when you're working on it. So give those suggestions a try. I see a great comment from Jazz Dude. Says, there are so many people on this planet in real need of help, and we have the luxury to share our hobby and have fun making music here. We are already very privileged. Yeah. And I think if you have, Michael Teams is a great suggestion. You could just donate to the local food bank. That's a great concept. Love that. But I think if, for people to have in-depth knowledge, I think it's really almost a responsibility to share that with others. All right, so Cliff Scherer just says, hi Greg, is there a way to increase the contrast of piano roll coloring of notes in the scale default setting? Is hard to see. Okay, so let's say if we are, all right, so let's say we have, all right, and sometimes if you have notes that are selected, it could be a little hard to see. So what I would do, what I see a lot of people do, is if you go to the settings, to user interface, and if you come over here and go to general colors, you could say, okay, I want to go to the editor background. So let's say I want to go to the editor background and I want to make this background lighter. You could do stuff like that if you wanted to. So, and you could adjust that to be like a very white background if needed. So when you come over here, you could just adjust, so if you wanted more contrast like that, you could, again, just go to general colors, make sure to use different color schemes, and at that point you could adjust like the editor background colors. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do. Sorry, my chat field jumped. Okay, so we have Karma Seggers 8757. Hello, Greg. Was wondering if there is or will ever be a way to trim audio events by placing the cursor on either side of the event and using the scroll wheel to trim. If not, can you suggest, please? So, some controllers do that, like the Yamaha Nuage, who is, but let's say if I come over, if we move a particular, so let's say I'll just do with an audio event. So if you have like kind of a jog wheel controller, you can just, so let's say, All right, so if you want it to come here, you could say, okay, I move it to here on this particular track, and then I think if we just go to, cut head, cut tail. So let's say if I have this selected, I have my cursor there. So if we go to range, you can say, okay, I want to cut head until that position. And then as we say, okay, I want it. So if you have like a scroll wheel, you can say, okay, now I'm here. We could just say, okay, I want to, again, go to edit, to range, and cut tail. So you could just kind of use that. There's also, you say, okay, I just want this particular region here, and I want to automatically erase what's before that selection, what's after that selection. If you go to edit, to range, to crop, then everything that's not currently selected will be erased. So again, you can just crop as well. So, but you can just do cut head, cut tail, or select the range with controllers and then crop. So let me know if that is kind of what you wanted to do. All right, so we see Mark Rabin's making coffee. And Tim K is just saying, shh, we're not supposed to mention coffee. I think I'm okay. So you got another 2.5 hours or so. But it makes me always want a coffee, and I can't really take a coffee break. So. All right, so we see from Cliff Scherer says, thanks, Greg. Guess I want to play the MIDI loops, so instead of using Steinberg's VSTs, use Omnisphere instead. So yeah, those particular loops are tied. The intention is, unlike a MIDI file that you play it and is it playing through a piano or a drum set or a percussion kit or strings or a vocal sample. Where the MIDI information isn't tied to a particular instrument. MIDI loops, when you open it, when you import it, will automatically go to the instrument that they were created in. So at this point, that way you could do that. But if you just drag it in, you could move the MIDI event down to the Omnisphere track and delete the instrument that you didn't want to use and have that play through. Then you kind of get the same thing. Then you could save it as, you can export that as a MIDI loop just by going to your file menu to export MIDI loop once you have one selected here. So you can just come right over. All right, so let's say this is our MIDI loop. So now it's going to a MIDI instrument. We could export the MIDI loop, and then you could export it and save it within the appropriate preset or instrument within Omnisphere as well. All right, so you see Michael Teams has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of Frangelico Orange Dream Ice Cream. Sounds like a great flavor. Thank you. Always appreciate it. All right, so we have Balsa joining from Montenegro. Thanks for being online with us. All right, so we see, so FlyV just says, thanks, Greg, that helped, but I'm still getting a Melodyne pop-up at startup. If you want to email me just a picture, you can send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. So it could be if Melodyne is being used in the project and it's not finding Melodyne, it could be looking for that. So check to, see if you're using Melodyne in the project, if Melodyne is still functioning and is licensed and available to be running inside of your Cubase. All right, so Mark Rabin wants more people to hit the like button. I try not to be too annoying, reminding people of that. All right, so we see from Alex, can I cut and paste a 3-bar motif into a 4-bar phrase without changing the feel? I want to create more space between the notes. Thanks. All right, maybe a couple different approaches for this. Okay, so let's add like a 3-bar phrase here. Here, I'll just make one with a real instrument. Sorry, I'll just make it into MIDI event. All right, so let's say. Okay, so let's say we have a 3-bar phrase here. Just reread this, make sure. Okay, so we had a 3-bar motif. Can I cut and paste a 3-bar motif into a 4-bar phrase without changing feel? I want to create more space between the notes. All right, so one of the things that we could do is so let's say we have 3 bars here. We'll call this our 3-bar motif, we'll say. Now you know why I'm not a songwriter. All right. So if we want to turn this into a 4-bar, one of the things we could do is just actually time stretch the MIDI. So if I just drag this over, we can now have this playback stretched out. So that would be more space between, so that way it could fit into like a 4/4 bar. If we want it to, let's say if we're in our larger editor, I could also just come here and extend this bar here, and let's grab like the range tool, and I'll just say, okay, we want to take this and duplicate. So I think that would still keep the same amount of space between them. So, but let me know if you wanted to do kind of like time stretching. So now we could have, you know, a 4-bar once we switch the object here to applies time stretch. So now if I wanted this to be 6 bars, it would play back at like half the speed. Versus kind of the original. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do. If not, just let me know. Okay, wonderful to see Dwight checking in from Bahamas. says my 61 MIDI controller will not allow me to play the chords like when I click on them with my mouse. Need your help, please. All right, so let's say we have this particular instrument. So I'm not sure if you're trying to trigger chord pads. So when we look at chord pads, I'm just hitting like C1, I believe. But if we come over here, then I could trigger the chords. Okay, but if we want to, I think if we click here on the chord pads remote settings, when we get to like the player remote control, we could choose what MIDI keys will actually start the range start. So depending on where you hit the octave key, and let's see if so you could actually just kind of set this. So make sure you know that this octave here, and again, if it's in the chord pads, go to like the little MIDI remote set up here, and now we could just say, okay, let's come here to C1, and you should be all set. Great to have you on, Dwight. All right, great to see Randy Lee Music on from Texas. All right. All right, we see Soren from Sweden. We see Mark Raven's got 1,200 plays this morning, so that's great. All right, Balsa asks, are there preferences to how MIDI notes react when MIDI events start or end? Is shortened. Would love for MIDI notes to be cut to also notes that are a little bit before the event start to not be muted. Okay. Okay, so let's say I'm not sure if it's the event here. So let's say if we're in an event, okay, so let's say we adjust our start position. All right, now we can see that these particular events, like the MIDI note, as we do that, we'll see it turn white, indicating that the MIDI, so if it's with the event, when that's being kind of truncated or resized, we can just come over here and we'll see that since that part is outside of the event boundaries, that those notes will become muted until the event boundaries are readjusted. And so if we do the end, you can see that the same concept is where if the MIDI note is occurring within the event. Now, if we had these notes that were kind of overlapping, and let's say we came here and I chose to cut at the bar. So if I cut here, we can see that, you know, those notes can be split, and that's going to be just a preference. So if we go to the preferences under editing MIDI, we could choose to split MIDI events. So if that is turned off, now when I come over here, I split, that's going to cut all of the MIDI events, because when we split, like those MIDI events don't exist anymore. But now with that preference enabled, so under again, editing MIDI, split MIDI events, hit apply. So now when I split, we'll have kind of this little range. We'll see now I do this, the note will split so that we don't lose those particular notes there. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to see, Balsa. All right. right, I think I just got a quick email from Vince. Let me take a look at it. All right, so Vince had asked about his Melodyne message. Just kind of reading it. It says Melodyne 5.31 has encountered a problem that prevents it from loading properly. Please contact Ceremony. So with that, I think it's going to be a Melodyne issue. Maybe Melodyne is crashing in the project. But that's a message that's kind of outside of Cubase. So I think that's going to be like a Melodyne issue, because if it was a Steinberg message, it wouldn't say contact Ceremony support. So you may want to reach out to Ceremony and see if they could give you any insights, or maybe reinstall it and see if that makes a difference. All right, we see Mark Rabin giving kudos to Nick for his work on his projects. And we see that Soren's released a new song. It says it's everywhere to find, called E Street Everything Changes, or from E Street. Maybe the song title is Everything Changes. Congratulations on everyone's releases. It's wonderful to hear. All right, Jack Bourne official says, are you from DC? Buddy lives down there, going down in April for a concert in Maryland. So yeah, I live just maybe 10 miles from the city. So I'm in kind of Alexandria, kind of between Old Town and Mount Vernon off the George Washington Parkway. So, but yeah, let me know who you're going to see in April if I'm around. If you want to grab a coffee or something, it'd be great. All right, so patch 267 says, hey man, I accidentally control track height and it changes to every single one. I can't undo that. Is there some way? Is there somewhat? I have poorly described. Sorry, my type is bad. So if you have like a number of track heights, all right, and you want to change. So let me just add number of tracks here. Okay, so let's say we look at, I have lots of tracks, all right, and I'll just hide my lower zone here. So if you hold down Control and Shift and use the mouse scroll wheel and just kind of hover in the project window, you could adjust the vertical height of all of the tracks. So Control or Command plus the Shift key, and use your mouse scroll wheel, and then you could zoom in and out vertically. If you want to zoom in and out horizontally, just the Control or Command key, but Control Command plus Shift, and now you can just come right over here and resize all the tracks globally in the project. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, Soren's received 1 gallon of strawberry ice cream from Michael Teams. All right, just reading through comments here. All right, so we see from John Costigan, it says, hi Greg, Cubase 14, Windows 10. Can I import track presets from Cubase 12 to Cubase 14 without overwriting the whole preferences folder? Wrong name. So let's say we make we have our own track preset. So we'll come here, let's save a track preset, John Costigan. Okay, we can see my contrast power that I made there. Okay, so if you want to migrate, usually all of the presets, the track presets, I don't think are version specific, but if we want to find them, go to your MediaBay, and we'll see user content. So we'll say we want to go to track presets, we'll say audio, and what I want to do, we'll just kind of search for everything here. And here's my John Costigan, our contrast power that we made earlier. So if I wanted to find the location on my hard drive, I could just right click and we could say show in Explorer or reveal in Finder, depending on your operating system. And then you could just see all of the track presets here. So I think that this isn't going to be Cubase 12 or Cubase 14 specific, that it goes into kind of a generic folder so that Cubase 12 and Cubase 14 can search for it. All right, Roland Stuff says, many thanks for your very full answer about latency, Greg. Really helpful. I'll check it all. See, Mark Rabin says that they donate to a food bank. Lots of need food. Almost everyone. Nobody should be hungry without a home, without electricity, without fresh water, internet. So I agree with that. All right, so we see Mark Rabin has a great comment, says nobody's born knowing Cubase, maybe violin, but not Cubase. No harm in asking questions. We all learn. We're here to improve. You're doing everything right. Keep going. All right. You see, Michael Team's also recommending for to check out the Cubase Nation Discord. All right, so we see clarification for my misunderstanding on Cliff Scherer's question. It says, my former question to the MIDI piano roll coloring, I wanted to know if the contrast can be increased for the notes in scale, especially chord scale, not globally. Okay, so I think I understand now. So let's come over. Okay, so I'm going to add a chord track here. Okay, so let me go ahead and let's draw in some notes here. All right, so I'm going to look at my global track. So we'll look at our chord track at the top. All right, so I want to draw in, let's say, a C note. We'll do a C sharp. We'll do an F. let's say an A. Okay, so now when we choose our color scale, all right, let me just move that up. Okay, so when we see this now, we have this set for velocity. When I choose to make it scale in chords, we can just adjust these. So we could see, okay, like in a B flat chord, you know, we could see these particular, you know, what particular notes here, you know, are going to be in the chord and out of the chord. And if we wanted to adjust these particular notes and see them, the colors. So once we go to like your color scale here, go to setup, and then you could say this pitch is not in the current chord or scale. This is in the scale, but this is within the particular chord. So you could now just double click here and adjust the particular strength of the colors. So once you open up kind of the color palette, you could say, okay, I want to go to my scale and chords. Let's go to setup. And now you could change the particular, you know, color schemes for each one. So just click once, and then you have kind of a standard color wheel selector. Then you could choose the appropriate colors for different, you know, out of scale, in scale, etc. All right, so you see from patch 267 says just after an undo for track mode, still no fix yet. So let me see if that's maybe with an earlier question. So let me know what you mean by undo for track mode. Some undos will only be for stuff that's editable. Some may be for like a mix console has a separate undo history. The sampler track and, you know, the sampler track and modulators have their own separate undo history as well. But let me know when you mean by track mode if you're switching from like instrument to group or something like that. It may not be an undoable action because it wasn't an edit. But if you could clarify, I could see if I could help. All right, Jackie Barr asks, is there a way to keep markers always visible and clickable, like in a vertical format, so they don't scroll off the screen when I'm transporting the timeline? The main marker window won't stay open. All right, so let's come over here and say we have a marker track. Okay, so let's go ahead and add marker track. Drop some markers in. All right, so I'm going to open up like my marker view. All right. Oh, I'm sorry, added a signature track instead. Sorry. All right, so now when we come here, we could see that we have markers. So let's say if we just kind of right click and say always on top. So if we want the markers always visible, what we could do is go to your project menu at the top, and we can say divide track list. And now as I scroll up and down, the marker window is always visible. If we want the marker tracks, again, it's project menu to divide track list. If we want to select a particular marker, I could open up the marker window here, and you could right click near the top and just choose always on top. So now as we kind of scroll, if I click elsewhere, I want to go to the mix console, this window can always be on top here. So if I open up another channel, I close that, this marker window will always stay open. So let me know if it's like the marker window itself that you want to be open, or if you want the markers to be kind of fixed and anchored to the top of the project, but you could do either. All right, so Mark Raven just says, Greg, I have a real question. Our next Zoom guest, they've been exceptional. Yeah, so I will reach out and see if I could get someone lined up to be a Zoom guest. I had a couple people in mind, and we could see if we could get some of them committed to the time. But I'll reach out to a couple people and see if they're available. I think it's going to be February 27th, maybe a week from this Friday. Okay. See, Mark Raven just says, actually, Greg, you're a songwriter, and I'm still here listening. Got to count for something. So I think I just talk a lot. Anyway, but thanks for the kind words. All right. So we see from Batman Studio, Greg, what's the best way to send tracks to my friend on, say, Cakewalk? As individual tracks that show up on time on his DAW, turn MIDI to audio, separate tracks, export, or what is this new DAW share? So I'm not sure if Cakewalk, I haven't really kept up with it in a long time since they kind of went to like a freemium model or free model. If they import DAW projects, you could just simply export a DAW project directly from Cubase and send that over to them. I'm not sure if they do that. It's a relatively new format. What a lot of people would do for the audio is maybe export it as an OMF. It's a more common interchange format that's been around for 15 years or so. It's used widely in DAWs. And then for the MIDI information, I would export it as a MIDI file. And in the name, you could say it's this instrument, it's this preset. You know, you could do stuff like that. But if it does like a DAW project file format, that's a great choice. I would use that. But if not, you may have to split audio into an OMF and MIDI into like a standard MIDI file. All right, so we see from Val, says, thanks for your info, Greg. My HALion 7 problem is officially solved. So that's great. All right, it's wonderful to see Beverly Beatty on. Says, going to try out a template later on. I always used to put the VST effects onto the individual track. Now I'd like to see how others feed effects. Yeah, let us know if you have any problem. Yeah, so you could use the same effects signal sent to multiple tracks. Yeah, right. So if we'll just show this quickly. So let's say if we want to take like, our drums here in this particular project and send them all to the same reverb. So instead of using like, multiple reverbs on our drums, what we can do is just I'm going to select all of my drum tracks here. And we right click, and what we could do is just say we want to add an effects track to the selected tracks. So I could take my multiple tracks, I want to add a RoomWorks reverb. So let's say we do this now. So now when I select a particular track and we go to our sends, we can see that the send is automatically populated. And as we come over here, I have one reverb. So say my kick drum, I want more of that reverb blended in. Or I want less reverb. So now each track that we select, we're sending it to one reverb. But let's say I want to send my snare more reverb than my kicks. So if I come over here, so now our be getting more reverb to our snares, and this is all going to just one single instance of RoomWorks with that. So one reverb, and I could feed multiple tracks. So when sometimes I see people using different reverbs on every single track, it's a kind of a great way to kind of eat up a lot of audio performance. But it also kind of loses a lot of cohesion in the sound. If everything sounds like it's in a different room, then nothing really sounds like it's together. So, but yeah, using effect sense for reverbs is great. All right, sorry, Chatfield just jumped. Mark Rabin just says his musical release would be much worse than it is without this crew. All right, says, hi Greg, I would like to play with quintal chords as often seen in jazz instead of normal tertian chords. Cubase does not support those. I do not like painting single notes stacked in a note editor. So let's say if, if it's going to be, so let's come over here to a chord. So if you want to make like a jazz chord, I'll just go. So obviously whatever you play or capture into Cubase will be, reflected in the chords. So if I wanted to just come over, let's go to, we'll add an instrument. Just load. All right, now we'll go to a chord track. So you can do very sophisticated chords with the chord track. So let's say I want to do, an F. Let's say diminish flat ninth with a G sharp, 13th in the bass, so you could do, very complex chords used in typical jazz stuff. So if you want to come over here, say, okay, I want this to be, a C sus4 ninth with, a B flat in the bass. So, I mean, you can just kind of come over and have very complex chords so that even when you drag these over to the parts, we'll just look at our MIDI data here. So we can see that we have, 4 voices there. If you want to have 5 voices in your chord, so you can do very complex chords with you. So, utilizing this, and even if we're in defining chords, I could come over here. I'll just do kind of a classic. Let's do MIDI input, and I'll just kind of lay my hand randomly on a keyboard. So we have A major 7th, 9th. So let's come over here. I'll play a different chord. So you have B major 7 flat 9th, 11th chord, and there's obviously different interpretations that you could use, but you could do very complex chords and for jazz or just about any type of genre. All right, so we see a question. Hello, I want to share my voice with my friends using my desktop sharing program at my computer, but they can't hear what I'm playing. How can I make them hear what I'm playing? So, it could depend, if your desktop sharing program is utilizing, is looking at the built-in, most of them will use like the built-in audio interface for your voice, and some of them will use but Cubase may not be utilizing that. So there is a program Steinberg makes called MixKey. So here you could set up different audio instances and say, and this is free. So you could say, okay, I want the voice of, my Rode NT USB microphone and my voice of Cubase, and I could blend the sound of these two or multiple sources, audio coming from different programs. And then when I'm doing the output for this, I would just send the output here from your operating system, whether you're on Mac or PC, out to Steinberg MixKey streaming music. So you could just say, okay, we want this to go out of your Steinberg MixKey. And then that's what you would set in the audio program, and that way, you could transmit both the audio from Cubase and the audio from your voice over like a screen sharing application. All right, so we see Raw Justice Hip Hop just got out of another event, number 72 and the like, checking in from across the river from Greg. So great to see you on. Yeah, so if you haven't checked out MixKey, that's a free download. Check that out. See Mark Rabin being so kind to express gratitude to people on the live stream that helped with his release. All right, so we see from Sue Ops is returning to my above motif phrase question. How would I insert space between the notes you played in your example to fit the 4 bars? Sort of a stretch motif in that way, logical editor. All right, so let's say we had this here. I will take our different parts here. I'll glue them together. Let's duplicate. And we'll just make this like 3 bars. Okay, so let's say we join this. We have a 3-bar motif here. So let's say we just move this up just for differentiation. All right, so we have different chords here. So I think if I just grab the range tool here, And then let's go to range, and let's go to the range, and let's just, I think we could just insert silence. And now we could just, I will make this event longer. So that way I could just come over, let's say I have a 4 measure long event, and I want, so I'm going to say, okay, I want to use the range tool, which is the second tool here. And then you could go to edit, to range, and we'll say insert silence. And that will kind of insert a blank measure. I'm just going to reread question, Alex. How would I insert space between the notes? You played in your example to fit 4 bars, sort of a stretch motif that way. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do, but you could use the range tool within the editor if that's what you want to do. All right, so we see from James Dalzell, hi Greg, for direct monitoring, is it best to turn DAW fader down and enable software monitoring for effect send? So if you're doing direct monitoring usually enables the audio from the input to be routed directly to its output. So if you're just taking an input, it's just going to say, look, you're recording your vocal or guitar, it would pass it directly to the output, so there's no discernible latency. Now, when you do that, if you have plugins, let's say if you're tracking your guitar part and you have plugins going on, the plugins themselves, you won't hear the sound. You're just going to hear kind of the straight sound that's going in, not being processed through software EQs, effects, inserts, guitar amp modelers, master effects, effect sends. It's the straight input to the output, and that's what direct monitoring does. So usually once you do that, there's no need to have to adjust the fader down because the signal is not going through the software audio engine. It's just basically going straight from the input and routing it directly to the output so that you can monitor with minimal latency. Okay, so we have from UK, Leonard Sants asks, hi Greg, can you explain each type of media files available inside the MediaBay, please? Certainly. All right, so we have different types of MIDI files. So we have audio files. So this could be an MP3, AIF, WAV file. MIDI files are going to be standard MIDI files. So when you are exporting standard MIDI files to and from different digital audio workstations or notation packages or hardware keyboards, MIDI files are great for that. We're going to have MIDI loops, and MIDI loops are going to be little MIDI files that are associated and will recall the particular instrument that they were created in. We're going to have patterns. Now, patterns is like when we use our pattern editor at the bottom of the screen. So if we want to come over and say, okay, let's add an instrument. We want this to be a pattern editor. I come over. We will just kind of double click on that particular instrument. And now we could have these patterns that are saved and recalled. That's what the pattern would allow us to do right there. We have track presets, and we talked about this. So if we had an audio track with lots of different or multiple audio tracks or an instrument track, we could say, okay, I want this to come over. So we have an audio track. And what I could do is say, okay, I have my favorite plugins on this track, and this is how I like to get my guitar sound or my vocal sound. I could just say, okay, let's say for guitar, I have the VST amp rack, and I want a filter on it. So let's put an auto filter, and that's my everything I need to do to make that sound. I'll just EQ. We'll do kind of a high pass filter as well. So now when I want to recall that, we could just save this as a track preset, and then we could search for our track presets. And then if we wanted, I believe the next one is going to be FX chain or plugin presets. So if we come over here, I tweak the sounds of a particular plugin. We could now, when we save that as a preset, we can now just simply recall that particular preset for a particular plugin. When we look at our next, we'll say is going to be FX chain presets. So when we do this and we go to a particular audio track, let's say every time I want to work with this particular instrument, I want to be able to save my particular chain of inserts on a particular track. So this, an effects chain preset, is going to be the combination of multiple insert effects on a particular track. We next have I believe it's the effects chain preset, or the strip presets. All right, so our strip presets are when we utilize the channel strip on the channel editor. So we could have a noise gate, multiple types of compression, or channel EQ. We could say, okay, I want a de-esser. I wanted to have a magneto analog tape saturation and a brick wall limiter. So if I've tweaked all of these settings, I could save that as a channel strip preset. So we come here, we could save this strip preset, and we could search for our channel strip presets. And we'll have, I think, video files next, if memory serves. Yeah, video files. So, you know, moving picture images, and then projects. So when we save projects, this would be like the .cpr file. So if you're like, oh, I did a project and it had the word yesterday in it, and it's somewhere on my hard drive and I saved it somewhere and I can't find it, you could then just search for particular project files. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so we see Mark Rabin just says February 27th. I'm putting in my calendar. I'm just going to verify the date. Yeah, so it would be February 27th. That'll be our next Zoom social. I'll try to arrange a special guest to do that, to share some wisdom with us. Okay, so we see from Alex, says with snap off, is there a shortcut or of left aligning two MIDI notes? Okay. So let's say I have a MIDI note that starts here, and I have another MIDI note that starts here. All right, so there is, like, if we want to, there's a transport mode where we could say video follows editing mode on and off. So if I come here, let's see, I guess it's not working on MIDI events. Let me see. Okay, that may not work on MIDI. It works on events, but let's say if we change our start mode to selection start, all right, let me just, all right, so that's going to be like for our start mode. So on our project window here, if I select the event with the video files transport, that will automatically go to the event. All right, but I don't think it works in the MIDI editor. All right, let me play around with it a little more, see if I get it to move the play position based on the note selection. All right, so let's say I want to go to all right, so one workaround you may be able to do is, let's say if I come here, and there's probably a better way of doing this, but if you had to come up with like a super, so let's say I want this note to start like right where this note begins here. So let's say this is in the middle and this note's on a grid. So I'm going to select this particular note. Let's come over. Let me just look in the Project Logical Editor, but we could probably just all right, let me see if there's just a function here of going to the all right, so let's try just a quick macro. All right, so we'll make a new macro here. Let me just see if it's... All right, so let me just try. Let's make a new macro. All right, so I want to do locators. Yeah, so let's come over here. So let's add this command. And then I want to navigate to the left locator. Okay, so I'll come over here. Let's say my cursor is here. And there's probably a better way of doing this, and I'll play with it for Friday. But if we get to macros, we'll say, and now we can select this note and say, like move to cursor. So we could do that, but let's see if I change my snap here to events, if that makes a difference. So say if I move this, yeah, and this may be like probably a better approach. So now let's say if our event is off grid, and I want these two to be the same. So if I move it to the grid, like this note is on a grid, but this note isn't. But if I choose this to change this to snap to event, now when I come over here, we could have that automatically snap to the start of that particular event. So that's probably a better method than the macro I was making. So now you can just automatically snap that to the start of another MIDI event. So try changing the grid in the MIDI editor to events, and then as you move, it will snap to events and not just to the grid. Sorry about that. Okay, so we see from Cliff, I guess a further clarification on the, he says still bothering. I was referring to black and gray color in the piano roll, not the edited notes. Any way to increase the contrast? So let's say if I'm here, I'm not sure if you want, like if it's like the black and gray color in the piano roll. So I'm not sure if it's like this, if you want, and maybe if you want to email me a quick picture, but you know, if I come here to, again, the user interface, and let's say the editor background, you know, here you could have, you know, more contrast, and you could adjust these two. But if you want to just like send me like maybe a screenshot and say, oh, it's this area, Greg, you don't understand, just you can send it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. Is there a solid undo when I accidentally hit Z? So if you just, so when you hit Z, you may accidentally kind of blow up the that one particular track to make it larger. So if you, so the undo doesn't work for that, but that's kind of a separate function. But if you go to your zoom, you can undo the zoom. So if you want to assign a keyboard shortcut, you can just come over here and undo zoom. So if you assign a keyboard shortcut, if you accidentally kind of hit the Z key and it got like, instead of like Control Z, you can just come over here. So the zoom settings are kind of independent of the edit settings. But if you wanted to, again, come here to zoom, just undo zoom, and assign a keyboard shortcut to that, and you'll be all set. All right, UK Leonard Sance asks, can you show us the difference between pre-fade and post-fade, please? All right, so if we have like an effect, so let's come over. And we want to, and this is often used for kind of like effects on vocals. So let's say if we want to come here to our vocal, we could just say, okay.
You stare background, not a sound.
All right, so right now we can see we could switch by right-clicking between Prefader and postfader. So right now we're postfader, and when we see it kind of this aqua bluish color, I'm really horrible at describing colors. I missed that day of preschool. We can now see that that is prefader. All right, so, and what this is going to do when I adjust my fader on the track is how the reverb will react to that. So right now, again, we are in post fader. So when I adjust my fader down, the reverb gets attenuated with the fader. Now when we move it to pre-fader, as I drop the fader, we're still going to hear the same amount of reverb, regardless of wherever the fader is. So if this was set to post fader, so that effects end is being affected by the gain on the channel itself. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to smash the like key. All right, so we see Flyv just ask one more question, Greg. You could ask as many as you want. My custom track colors are not staying the set. The left side of the track is red, the defaultly color. So colors are going to be based on the project themselves. So each project can have its own color schemes, and that way, as people share projects, the intended colors will be conveyed as part of the project and won't change when, like, if people have selected different colors. So make sure that if you want kind of your default colors, that you're starting off with a template with a, and we could go to, when we come over here, if we have this set up, we could just say, save color set as default, and we'll go there. But make sure that, the colors aren't global. The colors are going to be project based. So every time you start a new project, you may have different colors depending on how you're starting the particular project. All right. Gatenlania 2554. Is there a way to activate the R&D Portico plugins without the e-licenser dongle? So those are still going to require the e-licenser. I don't think Yamaha had updated them to Steinberg licensing. So I think since Yamaha discontinued the plugins 5-6 years ago, that they may not make the transition. It might be on e-licenser. So, but they're currently, the only way they're going to work is with the USB e-licenser. All right. So Mike Kulikov asks, hi Greg, when I put one automation node, example CC11, only at the beginning of the track and hit play from the middle of the track, my Cubase 14 doesn't read automation unless another node comes by. So are you doing it as automation, or are you doing it as MIDI CC? So if I was doing kind of many times people use this term interchangeably, but if we go into here and we say, okay, we want, let's say we'll just do main volume here. So let's say we're playing our piano and we're happy with our piano. All right, so say we're, And I want to switch this to CC7. So let's say I'm going to draw in CC7 at 103. All right, so now I'll just put it in here at the note. All right. All right, so when we do MIDI CCs, we can say, okay, that is automatically going right there. And now if I change this MIDI CC value to lower and I hit play, we could see that that MIDI CC is designed to chase. So automation may not chase and kind of look backwards. It's going to look at kind of the existing value when it's happening. But if it's a MIDI CC message, if we go to the key command, not to the key commands, but rather to the preferences or settings, and we go to MIDI, let's see, I thought it'd be under, maybe just under MIDI here, that you'll see chase events, and just make sure that, and here you could, chase MIDI controllers as well right there. So automation may happen just at that moment in time and needs a node to trace to actually go back if you kind of change the position, but MIDI CCs are designed to chase. Okay, so we see, greetings, Greg. Can you go over how to properly set up a vocal using effect send with reverb, post, and prefaders? Every time I do it, when I turn down the send, the vocal, it turns down as well. So just a quick recap on that. So let's say if we take our...
Not a sound, tell me.
All right, so right now we're set to post fader. So if I bring this down,
we can't go on.
we still hear kind of the original dry material. So right click, let's say we go to prefader.
How can I feel?
I can still have my amount, but when I drop the volume fader, so that reverb stays the same. So if you want the reverb to attenuate or to be boosted to gain going into the reverb send, then you want it to be post fader. All right, so we see Val's liking the AD plus dangerous audio thing. Okay, so we see from Alex is perfect. Thanks, Greg, about the snapping to the event. We see from Vince just says, thanks, I never knew about the project colors setup. All right, so Jackie Barr says, I'm brand new to Cubase. Well, welcome to Steinberg and the live stream community. I want to go through tutorials from the beginning, but most of the tutorials are 4 to 5 years old, or say they are for version 14 or even earlier. How different would those be? I think that most of those tutorials would still be applicable. I think that, elements in Cubase are generally kind of augmented with each new version, and it's not necessarily like a brand new paradigm. So the transport has stayed the same. There might be new modulators, but if you're working with modulators, those existing modulators that have been in earlier versions are still there. So there's a lot of backward compatibility. So I would start with, you could probably, a lot of stuff may look slightly different, but the concepts and functions will still be there for like the last 10 or 15 years. So there's probably a major kind of GUI overhaul, probably at version 10 when everything kind of went in high DPI as well. So, but for like the last, 6-7 years, I think you're going to be in good shape. So, and you could always look through the Cubase index when you have particular questions as well. All right, so we just see from Flyvia comment says, what was it I was working with? The colors and preferences, the user interface colors to different types of tracks. So yeah, you have that option as well. So like when you go to different, mixer channels here. So let's say, okay, I want to see, all of my channels in my project. So I see I have red fader caps. I have kind of white fader caps. Like our effect sends will be different. Our group tracks will be different fader caps, etc. Our effects tracks will be kind of purple. Groups will be blue. So if you wanted to change the default color caps for faders, come over here to settings, and then you could say for your fader colors, also for different types of tracks, if you want MIDI tracks to be one color, VCA tracks to be another, but you could just kind of see all of the different color options here for the different fader caps if needed, so you could quickly differentiate. All right. All right, so let's go to a couple questions that were mailed in. All right, so we had a question. This is kind of a tricky one. Is how to undo an audio fade out that is written into the end of a file. So let's say we have a fade out on this particular file here. So let's say, we look at this file, we have kind of just straight file, and we want to maybe we see a fade out that's been written into a particular file. So then I'll just write the fade in so we could all see it. All right, so we'll just get a process and we'll choose a fade out. So let's say we have a linear fade out. I will now create I'll bounce this selection. All right, so the question was, how can we make this file not fade out? So this could be a little tricky, but if you spend some time on it, we can come over here. So I would maybe start with, when we go to processes, go to the envelope, and we could see that we could adjust kind of the gain here. So say we'll try, and we'll make it kind of more a curve type. And if we do that, let's save a preset here. And then let's just bring in a little bit of gain as well. So let's just come over here. And then, as we kind of work, we could say we just want, to kind of find the spots. You might have to just kind of, come over here to this, and let's increase the gain of that. Let's adjust the envelope again. And then you could just kind of keep working it, but there's no like magic, reverse the fade out. Some people think, we could just come over here and, reverse the fade out and just say, okay, we want to do conversely kind of a fade in, but you might just have to kind of start here. And let's say if we try bringing that up, so we could try to add more gain, but there's no kind of magic fix to, bring up the gain level. So you might just have to go through each little part and increase the gain slightly more. So if we're here, we can say, okay, I want to take, I'll take the gain off here. So we can say, okay, I want to take this and let's adjust the process. So let's adjust our gain and we'll bring that down to where it's roughly, and you can just do kind of little sections of it. Say now I want to adjust the gain of this. And add slightly more gain. So you could just kind of keep doing that to get rid of the fade in, but it's not like a magic process, I think, in any audio editor to immediately get rid of a linear fade out. All right, another question we had, and I saw this in the comments for the last live stream, was how to link Cubase 15 with WaveLab 13 without closing Cubase. All right, so there's two different ways that we could do this. Let's say I want to take a particular file here. Let me just import this. I'll just import a new file here. That's okay, so one of the things I could do is if I wanted to take this file into WaveLab for editing, there's kind of two different processes. One is just to go to the audio menu and choose Edit in WaveLab. That will launch WaveLab, allow us to do processing and editing. So at that point, we can do like the editing. Probably the easier way is just to run it as an ARA extension. So if I come over here, we'll see extensions, and then we could just go to WaveLab. So now when I double click on a file to launch the sample editor, we are in essence in WaveLab. So I could come here and just say, okay, I want to adjust the level of this. So let's say, okay, I want it to be -6. And at that point, we could just, we can see kind of your level adjustments here. So anything that we want to get rid of, we can just kind of do our editing and have that automatically be updated in two files. So you could choose to do from the audio menu to edit in WaveLab or run it as an ARA extension. So if now we wanted to make that permanent, we could just go at the extension level and choose to make it permanent. All right, here's a question. How to reset multiple clip gain automation values to 0 dB. Okay, so let's say if we come over and we have files here and we've adjusted the clip gain of multiple events. So let's say if I'm here, All right, so just grab this. Let's grab this area, make it louder or make it really soft. Okay, so let's say we're doing this and we want these all to revert back to 0 dB easily. Okay, so now we can just simply come over here and select multiple events, and we'll see in the info line that we could just type in 0 and we're right back to where we were. Now a little shortcut that we could do is to come over here and hold down Control or Command and just click in the volume field. So I'll just come here. And then you could reset them all at once here. So and now we're all right back to all the selected events. Come right over here, hold down Command or Control, and then hit Enter. And now all the values are set to 0 dB across the board for all the events. So you don't have to do it one by one. Okay, the next question mailed in says, hi, for the next Cubase live stream, a question I've been wondering about. I'm an artist 12 on PC and can't find a simple way to load my own samples into Groove Agent pads. The best I could do is drag a WAV file from the folder onto the pad. But that really only works with 2 screens. The issue seems to be that when I'm working on one screen, only Groove Agent disappears from the Cubase window once I focus on the File Explorer. Any ideas? Okay, so we'll come over here. Let's add an instance of Groove Agent. Okay, let me just come over to where we're going to have some files. So I'm going to open up just an instance in Finder here or Explorer on Windows. Okay, so let's say if I come over here, just find a one where I think I have some. All right, so let's say I have some files here. All right, so when we want to kind of come back over here, we could just say, let's go to Groove Agent, and I'm just going to put it to right click and just say always on top. And we may have to just kind of take like my Finder window over here kind of and say, okay, when we go to, let's say our projects, and I'll just come right over here. So say Groove Agent SE. So now when I want these particular files over, just going to now kind of Alt tab or Command tab, and then I could just drag and drop. So just kind of come over here. One of the things that might help if you just kind of hover near the top of the plugin and just say always on top. Otherwise, when you click elsewhere, the Groove Agent kind of goes behind, and you may be able to open it up with the windows, but just right click, say always on top. You could just, again, select these particular files, say, okay, I want all of those particular samples, and drag and drop them over. So say, okay, I have these snares, so I take these snares and Alt-Tab. I want all these snares going to this bank, and I want them going directly onto those pads. Conversely, you could also just, in the file browser here, just say go to your file explorer and drag and drop right here from within Cubase. You can navigate anywhere on your computer. So if you want to go to your documents, to projects, then you can, so we'll find our Groove Agent SE. So, and now I could just come over here, and then we could select, you know, your particular files over here. And I think I even have like under favorites, I think I have drum one shots. Yeah, so I could just go one shots here and say, okay, here's these particular folders. So you don't have to go out to Explorer or to Finder. You could just drag them all from the MediaBay in the right zone here as well. But either way will work. All right, let me jump back to live questions. And again, you can always send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so we see from Jazzy Lamel, okay, it says, hey Greg, so to recap with the prefader or postfader, do I adjust the reverb itself in the plugin itself on this end, or can I just use the fader itself to bring the reverb up front? So generally, when you're using when we have a reverb that's going on as a send, a lot of times you may adjust kind of the level of the reverb itself. If you're doing an insert, most plugins will have kind of a mix parameter, and that would blend kind of like the amount of the reverb that's being sent out. So often if you're using it as an insert, since you don't have the send to actually blend the different devices, you would, as an insert, you would use the mix amount to set the amount of the mix there. If you're doing, let's see if my Cubase is acting up here. If it's, try, let me just see if I can terminate it real quick here. Probably come back in a minute, but all right, so but we'll show this here. All right, so we
Feel the way.
okay, so when we add a reverb as a send, I'm going to come over here. So if I'm doing a reverb as an insert, I would come over and let's go to, let's say, our reverb. So when we come over here, you'll see like a mix amount. So generally, a lot of times, a lot of plugins may default to 50%. So we could use this to kind of blend how much the dry signal is mixed with the reverb. But when we're doing this as a send effect, what we want to do is, so I'm going to add a send effect to this track, add a RoomWorks. We want this mix to be 100% because we're setting the balance with the reverb return here. So we say, okay, let's come over, and now as we adjust our reverb,
Feel the way.
so we could add more reverb. So we kind of blend the dry signal.
In light we lay.
Now, as we're doing this, we're sending from this track to our reverb channel. All right. So let's say if we were here and we're listening to our reverb. Now, if my reverb channel is the volume on the effects return channel is all the way down, I could send this out, and we don't really hear that that reverb effect because the volume on the reverb is down here. So we need to have this volume on the reverb return channel so that when we send to it, it's going to have volume on the reverb return channel to be blended in. Yeah, so if you don't have the effect send here on, you could adjust the reverb. Nothing is going to the reverb until, that's why it's called a send. So when we go to the send, we now send the signal going out to the reverb. And then you kind of could do the balance there. All right, just rereading a question. So they kind of work together in concert so that, you know, if you have this all the way up when using a send, but your send is all the way down, you're not going to hear reverb. If this is all the way up and your effects return channel is all the way down, you're not going to hear reverb. But by default, when you add it, and there's a preference where you could have it at 0 dB or minus 6 dB. Then as you come over here, you could adjust the amount of send so that you get kind of the expected like gain relationship and gain structure between a track and its effects send. Okay, so we see from Mike about the chasing the CC controller. It says, I was talking about CC controller. As you showed in the key editor, your chase MIDI controller box is ticked, so is mine, but Cubase doesn't read the value without passing a node. So it seems, you know, so it's probably, let's say if I just come here, let's do kind of this cello excerpt here. You know, you could see if it's doing it for all instruments, but let's say as we're doing this, I'll set my volume here. All right, so say I'll start off at like 106. All right, so I'm gonna stop, and let's say I set this now to 47 at that point. So now when I hit play, it should be about half the volume. And then if I put this up here, we'll hear it louder even though it's not passing the node. And if I come over here, play again, much softer. I'm sorry, let's. So I'm not kind of doing anything special, but you know, you can make sure, you know, like check also to make sure like the You say it's changing when it does pass a node, but try a different instrument and see if you get the same behavior. Maybe it's going to be something where an instrument doesn't respond to it. But, you know, I just did 2 different instruments and it kind of seems to work as expected there. So let me know if I'm doing anything differently than you are, Mike. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely, so has been listening in on the background. All right, great to see Millard Brown from Pennsylvania, where he says, madness and change abound here in Pennsylvania. Hope you're all well and happy. So, all right, we see Flyvy says he's now sitting here playing around with colors. All right. All right, so I think we are at the end of questions. We'll see if there's more questions that kind of pop in. I think last time we had about an hour of questions left. So making up for it today. But I'll wait a minute or two, see if we have other additional questions come in. So Mark Raven says February 19th solar projection predicted. Keep an eye out for it. I think there's supposed to be maybe meteorite showers tonight that are visible. Not sure if it's everywhere. Maybe limited to eastern U.S. or probably everyone can see it. All right. Give it a minute, see if other questions pop in. All right. Mark Raven just mentioning that NASA posted about the All right, so Jackie Barr says the other day I asked about the configurations view not sticking when switching from console to project windows. You're going to check. So I was playing around with it a little bit. Let's take a look at it. Now we have some time. So I'll just do a new project here. Okay, so let's go ahead and okay, so we look at our mix console here. So we say, okay, we want right, let's see if I have my configurations. All right, so let's say I want to come here. I have these tracks selected. So let's say I have audio 2, 3, and 4 selected. And I want to come over here. Let's say, let's show selected events only. Let me just copy some data over. Okay, so let's come over. We'll look at our configurations here. So let's say, okay, I only want to see selected tracks. Okay, so that's kind of working as expected. So let's say I want to hide selected track. Let's show all tracks, and now I want to hide selected tracks. So this lower zone mixer is, so now let's get to our configuration and we'll say hide selected tracks. So the other tracks are now visible, so it's working with the lower zone. Now let's come over to our mix console. So let's say when we come here, we want to sync the project and the mix console. So we'll open up our first mix console here. And let's go to our configurations. So we'll show selected tracks. Now when we get to F3, that is kind of showing up. So let's say I'll just hide my input channels. Let's say I want to show all tracks. And we go to F3. So all my tracks, let's say I only want to see my effects channels. So let's say if I come here, all right, so there we can see our track types, but it looks like, you know, for our different track configurations here. So let's say if we want to have tracks, let's say I go to my visibility here and I want to hide tracks 2 and 4. I could save this as a configuration, so we'll call it 1. Now let's go to our mixer, and then we won't see tracks 2 and 4. So we see track 1 and 3. So it seems to be kind of working as I would expect. So we have our channel configurations. Those seem to be working. So let me know if I'm kind of misunderstanding it. All right. So Roland stuff says, I don't think it's a fair question, Greg, but do you know when it's going to stop raining here in England? Thanks for the live stream as always. Yeah, my wife and I were looking at like different vacation areas in Europe, and it seems like everywhere we're looking at has just been kind of flooded in the last week or so. So hopefully I think we have like Thursday through Sunday scheduled for rain all the time, and we just got over like kind of a bad winter storm. So, but hopefully the sun will come up. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. So, all right. So we see Jay from Secret Studios. He says, have you received a CC1 controllers? Haven't gotten it yet. This should be here like this week, hopefully. Right, so Tim Weinheimer is just asking, how would I upload a personalized script for a, maybe it's Arturia Spark drum machine to help index on the Cubase forum? So let's say if we come over, let's just go to, so there is kind of like an area where you could upload the MIDI remote scripts. I haven't done it myself. So I think it's maybe under. So it's the shared MIDI remote tag here. So just kind of Googling it. And let me just see if there's an upload. So maybe if it's like if you match on the form and just do like the shared MIDI remote. So, and then I think that it could be just kind of uploaded here, but let me just see if there's. So you could probably, if you look around in this area, you could probably find where to upload it. So it could be shared with other people. All right. So we see, hello everyone, will the explode chord function Cubase 13 come back someday? So yeah, it has come back in Cubase 15. So let's come over. If I come, let me just add a quick chord track just so we can. I'll just add some MIDI. Okay, so. Okay, so let's say we're in our score editor. I'll just pull up a quick example here. I have one. It's kind of prepared. Okay. All right, so let's say we want to explode these chords. We go to the score menu, and I think it's under functions, explode. We can say we want to put it to new tracks, number of new tracks. And as we do this, we can now kind of see all of the new parts automatically split. So just go within the score editor functions, and then you'll see the explode function there. So it's brought back in 15. All right, so we see John Costigan just mentioning, just asking where you can listen to Mark Rabin's release. All right, so we see from Roland Stuff asks, I saw you opening up some MIDI loops earlier. Where are they, please? I can find the audio loops under Media, but no MIDI ones, which I think you said come as standard with Cubase. So yeah, some of the libraries. So one of the libraries that's just predominantly MIDI loops. If you come over here to MIDI loops, you'll go down, you'll see SQL library, and we see this kind of a MIDI, like almost like a 5-pin DIN with a loop that would indicate when we go to like some of the different loops, like in drum machines. So let's see if we go to past, future, perfect. So now I could just drag over MIDI loops here. So a lot of the ones that are set up for, you know, drum machines as well. So let's say if we go to Delicatessen, this may be all audio. But as we kind of come over here, let's say Ambient Lounge, you can see I don't have a license for that, but so as you kind of explore, you could just say Blockbuster may have some, so some will be, but you could tell just kind of by that particular icon. So say, but you could always, let's say Grit and Grime, things can be all audio, but some of the ones that are like, you know, drum sample sets will also come with MIDI loops as well. So you could just kind of take a look, but you could recognize if you want to play with a bunch of them, they're really good. Go to the SQL library, and there's lots of great MIDI loops found there. Okay, so we see Randy Lee Music's return. It's great to have you back. Okay, so we see from Jackie Barr, says when I choose save configuration like vocals, low end, etc., because it's a huge project, when I go back in the other window, those aren't there anymore. All right, so let's say we just open up kind of a large project. Okay, so let's say, you know, here we have 68 tracks or so. So let's say I want to take all of my background vocals. All right, and let me just add configuration here. All right, let me just come here to the visibility. That would probably help if I did it there. Just going to hold down Shift. All right, so now I only see background vocals. I will update that configuration. All right, so now we'll come over here. Let's get to, let me make sure that these are synced here. Then we go to my visibility. All right, so you can see where it's, I'm only seeing the background vocals, but I don't necessarily see it here, but they are. So let's say if I come over here and we say, let's look at all tracks. All right, so now I go to my mix console and we see all of the tracks. So I'm not sure if you have to save it as a separate configuration for this console, but let's say now I go here to background vocals, but those are kind of synced. So it looks like it's synchronizing, but maybe you can't switch to other ones from here. But if you, once you open it up, if you save the configuration, so I think the configuration is synced, but the actual choices may be independent, like this maybe, but I'll do some more research. So let me know if that's kind of what that you want to be able to select the same configuration here as you do on the project window here. And I'll play around with that some more. Sorry for my misunderstanding. All right, so we have another question from Giverlet. It says, if you have several copies of the same audio file, is it possible to apply time stretching or pitch correction vary audio to all copies simultaneously? Okay. So, and this could be contingent on a preference. So I believe the default behavior, so let's come over, let's take.
'Cause I've tried.
All right, I'll just take that out of musical mode. All right. All right, so let's say we have the same file here. So let's listen to it.
'Cause I've tried all the equations.
All right. Now there's a preference when we come here under editing audio for on processing shared clips. So here we could just say, we could say keep the current audio in project. Okay. Or we could just say, okay, I want to open the options dialog box. So we have this same clip.
Tried all the equations. 'Cause I've tried.
All right, so now let's say I do very audio editing on it. So we'll come over here. We're in our sample editor, and I will just do some horrific very audio edits. All right, so now when we come over here.
'Cause I've tried all the equations. And I haven't found.
So let's take a.
'Cause I've tried all the.
So there is like a, on processing. So if I wanted that to be applied to all of the clips, let me just check that preference one more time. So we come over here. No, it's not that one. It's on processing shared clips. Here we could say process existing clip. Okay, So now let's say,
'cause I have tried all the equations. 'Cause I...
all right, so I'm going to do this one more time here. So I have that preference set. So let's say I'm going to have this same clip repeated. All right, so now we listen to it.
'Cause I have tried all the equations, and I haven't found the answer yet.
Now this is a repeated clip, so with that preference set, it should behave the same exact way.
'Cause I have tried all the equations, and I haven't found the answer yet.
So if your preference is if you want it to be shared, across multiple instances of the same file, you would just come over to your settings, editing audio on processing shared clips. You could say process existing clip, or you could create a new version or open a dialog box. So if you wanted it to be, I do an edit once and it's applied to every time that audio file is used in a project and you don't want to have to redo it, then you could process the existing clip. If you want to create a new version, anytime you do a change, that overwrites a new version of the audio file on top of the pre-existing file. All right. So we see Gerald Ely is also mentioning it's raining in California all week. No golf this week. Yeah, I think the storm is headed east towards me. And we see that it snowed today in Budapest. All right. Okay, reading through comments here. All right, so we see Giverlay. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. It's just mentioning on Sundays doing a multi-track recording session with amazing percussionists. It's always a lot of fun. Have a great session. All right, so we see from Roland Stuff says, great, thanks for showing me where the MIDI loops are, Greg. I guess I haven't looked closely enough. Okay, so we see from Jackie Bars that the configuration says, yes, that's it exactly. So I think the design, it may be that it's, synced so that when you open up the mixer that it's automatically go there, but I'll see if there's a way of having the presets synchronized as well. Thanks for your patience with my misunderstanding. All right, wonderful to see Michael Pierce on. We hope you're feeling back to normal after the holidays. Michael Teams is jinxing his climate by saying he needs more rain outside of Dallas. All right, so we have Funtcase UK just saying good afternoon to everyone. Thanks for joining us, being part of the community today. All right, so we see from Vince just says, ooh, process existing clips, cool. All right. All right, so you see that Michael Pierce is definitely on the mend, so it's great to hear. Sorry you had to holidays derailed. All right, so it looks like we are at the end of questions. We'll see. I'll give it another minute, see if other questions come in. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. Hope everyone's learned a new tip or trick. And if you have, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And again, we do this on Tuesdays and Fridays, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. It's always wonderful to be able to help people. All right, so we see from Terry Gray. Hey, Greg, I have a macro that sets folder and group for selected tracks. Is there a way to have it color them too? All right, so I think there is a default macro that does that. So we'll come over here and let's look at the particular macro. One of the factory defaults is like selected tracks to new folder and group channel. So I want to make a project logical editor preset. So we're going to say, right. So I'm just going to check the like where the selection ends up. So let's say, okay, I'm going to add a quick audio track. All right, so I'm going to take these 3 tracks and we'll go to our macros and we'll say selected tracks to new folder. Okay, so you probably have something like that. Okay, so you want the folder. So let's see if we come over here and close the folder. So go to track folding, toggle selected track. Now it's okay. So let's see if we come. I think if we I just want to make sure that if we get this selected, we could do it. But let me just make sure I could select the particular folder. So this is what the current selection is the group. All right, so let's say the group is selected. We'll see if we go to all right, let's see if we could come over and maybe use the project logical editor to select the parent folder. All right, so let's see if our container type is set to folder, and let's see if we get a property set to parent object is selected. Okay, so what I need to do is to take this selection. If I close the folder, I'm just seeing if I could select. So this is the selection. So let's see if I. All right, so we have our group track here. I'll play around with it some more, Terry, to see if I can get it for Friday. But I think if we could get this selected, if we get this closed, so let's say if I close the folder, so we'll get to our track folding. Right, so it's not going to be toggle selected new track. So let's say if I come here, I have this, let's flip. I just need to get that top folder track selected. And then that isn't selected. I have to manually select. But let me see if I'll play around with it and see if I come up with a more clever solution for Friday's live stream. Sorry about that, Terry. Okay, so we see Michael Pierce has a complicated question he's going to mail in. All right, so we see from Bratman Studio Rick says, is there a quick way to convert audio, say bass guitar to MIDI? I could play around with notes in MIDI next week if you're out of time. So yeah, you could do that for like a monophonic voice. What you could do is just use Very Audio for that. So if we want to come over here, let's say we have our bass part. So we go to our Very Audio editor. And then under, you'll see choose functions, you'll see extract MIDI. And now we could just see the MIDI performance of the bass. So you could use Very Audio for kind of monophonic sources to convert that into MIDI, and then you could tweak around with it in the MIDI domain. Okay. All right, we'll see if there's another question kind of sneaks in. If not, we'll wrap up a couple minutes early. Thanks for the kind words, Vince. Appreciate it. All right, so we see from Rick, says, cool, thanks, audio to MIDI. So. All right, well, it looks like we are out of questions. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. We'll be back on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. If you want questions, you can send them in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. I hope everyone's learned a new tip or trick. I'll work on some of the macros, see if we get the colors on a newly created folder and group track created. So, but with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank again everyone. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back on Friday. Thank you very much.